Hello students, welcome back. Myself Pushpendra Singh and we are going to start with our current affairs. So today you have 23rd of April 2021 and you know that these lectures are basically useful for those who are preparing for the civil services examination as well as other government competitive examinations, and these lectures are basically entirely based on the current affairs, so you can easily go through these lectures for your current affairs preparation, right? For that you can also refer the national newspapers like the Hindu or Indian Express, right? And you can supplement your preparation with the help of these lectures. These lectures are uploaded on the YouTube on the day-to-day basis, so you can refer those lectures. So you can subscribe the Future IAS on the YouTube, and there you will get the daily current affairs based lectures. All right. So let's begin with the lecture. Okay. So first, basically, we are going to deal with a news known as the KRI Nanggala. The KRI Nanggala is basically an Indonesian Navy submarine, right, which have recently been gone missing, right, in the waters. So in an effort to save the 53 personnels who were basically on board at that time when the submarine called KRI Nanggala gone missing in the waters, the Indian Navy basically dispatched its own deep submarine rescue vehicle, that is also known as DSRV, from Visakhapatnam to the Indonesia, definitely to support the Indonesian Navy, specifically in the search and the rescue operations which have been carried out, right, in the Indonesian water for the searching of the KRI Nanggala, which is a submarine belongs to the Indonesian Navy, where 53 personnel on board are also missing. Okay, so the KRI Nanggala is basically a diesel electric attack submarine vessel, right, belongs to the Indian Navy, and it is basically one of the two Chakra class submarines, which is a Type 209 design. This is all technical specification you need not to bother about, but you must understand that this is a diesel electric attack submarine vehicle, right? This is the first thing, and second, it belongs to the Chakra class submarines, which is also belongs to the diesel electric vehicle. Okay, now as you know that Indonesia, which is also known as the Republic of Indonesia, right? It is basically a country in the Southeast Asia. It is a country in the Southeast Asia and Oceania, which is basically a region between Indian Ocean as well as the Pacific Ocean. The Indonesia consists of more than 17,000 islands. Yes, more than 17,000 islands with the small islands. The main islands are basically Sumatra, Java, Sulawesi, parts of Borneo as well as the New Guinea island, which belongs to the Indonesia. Okay, so what happens is on 21st of April 2021, the submarine got missing, specifically in the deep waters during the SUT torpedo drill north of Bali. Okay, what is this SUT torpedo drill? That is, SUT means the surface and underwater target, right? This is basically ongoing and recurrent exercise which are conducted by any navy. So it is basically surface and underwater target heavyweight torpedo exercise that has been carried out, right, in the waters of Bali, right? The Bali is basically an Indonesian island, belong to Indonesia, right, which is known for its forestic volcanic mountains, right? And it is basically also known for the iconic rice paddies which have been grown on the Bali, and also known for the coral reefs. And also the Bali is also known for a religious site, like you have Uluwatu temple, which also the most famous, world famous temple also located over there. Okay, now this boat, which is named after the Nagala, which is basically considered as a divine and powerful short spear, which is owned by the Prabhu Baladeva, right? Which is the Prabhu Baladeva, which is a person, right, or who is the elder brother of Krishna, which is basically the recurring character in the Byang Puppet Theatre, belongs to the Indonesia. So this Byang Puppet Theatre is basically classical Javanese puppet drama, right, that basically use the shadow shown by the puppets, that is manipulated by the rods, right, against the screen, which is basically lit from the behind. So that is something which is a shadow that is shown by the puppets, right? That is how you will basically translate this. That is basically you will manipulate them with the help of rods, and that will be shown, lit behind the screens, right? So this Byung puppet is basically developed in the 10th century, and it was basically originated in the southern India. Now this puppetry would have, probably spread to the Java with the spread of the Hinduism in the Indonesian island, which is also known as Java. Okay. Now you can also say that, this is basically in that Byung puppet, right? Since it is originated from the southern India, it is basically, having some sort of a, to depicting some sort of a mythologies, right? Like the episodes from the Hindu epics like Ramayana, Mahabharata, which is also shown with the help of these Byung puppets, which are basically shown in the Java. Okay. So it is basically, the vessel or submarine vehicle, which is also known as KRI Nangala, which have gone missing with, 53 personals on board, and now the rescue operations are underway to, to search for that submarine of the waters of Bali. Okay. Next, the FOSS4GOV Innovation Challenge. So what is that FOSS4GOV? FOSS4GOV means it is basically, basically free and open source software. So F means free, O means open, S means source, S means software. So free and open source software for government innovation challenge. So it is simple that innovation challenge, which is also known as FOSS4GOV, right, have been incorporated by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology to accelerate the adoption of free and open source software with the government of India's agencies, right? So with that challenge, which is basically hashtag FOSS4GOV government challenge, the government or the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology basically calls upon all FOSS innovators, which are basically involved in the free and open source software, which are basically can be used by any person, right? Which have also invited the technology entrepreneurs, right? Specifically all those startups which are involved in the development of or the implementation of this free and open softwares innovation, specifically in the CRM and ERP. What is the CRM and ERP? See, CRM means it is basically a customer relationship management. That is customer relationship management. Okay. And what is ERP? ERP means enterprise resource planning. So this is basically the two form, or is basically used in the different applications, specifically while you conduct the business, right? Definitely you will have the probable applications also in the health, education, right, agriculture and urban government. So the hashtag FOSS4 Innovation Challenge basically inviting various innovators, startups, right, technology entrepreneurs to develop that type of free and open software which can be used or which can be useful in the supply chain management, in the customer relationship management, right, in the basically some sort of a enterprise resource planning also, for the purpose of the developing of this free and open source software, specifically with the use of different fields like health, agriculture, urban governments and all sort of the things. So let me give you a brief introduction about this regarding this free and open source software. So first of all, let me give you a brief understanding about it. For example, if you are conducting any business, right, that business may consist of a handful of employees, or that may have the diverse employee, that may have many number of employees, right? So you have to have many challenges, like first of all you have to have the pricing, product planning, right, isn't it, accounting, financing, right, managing the payrolls of those employees, right, dealing with inventory and many other things, right? You have to manage your business like anything, right? So you have to need certain tools by which you can basically manage all such challenges to handle that type of challenges that is basically confronting you, right, obviously with a more efficient way. So the business is basically used a planning tool. That planning tool is known as enterprise resource planning system, that is also known as ERP system. So that is entrepreneurship or enterprise resource planning. Okay, that is a tool which is basically used by most of the businesses. Now it is basically an open source. That is why I said it is a free and open source, a tool which is known as ERP, which is known as enterprise resource planning tool. Now it is an enterprise resource planning software system which is basically where the source code is made publicly available. Now anyone can use that source code, and it is an open source ERP that is particularly attractive specifically to the small business as well as the mid-sized businesses, right? And those businesses which want to upgrade their their businesses over the period of the time. So most like other softwares like that is available in the market, the open source ERP solutions which are basically useful for the mid-sized businesses as well as for smaller size business enterprises. So the targeted segments belongs to the government of India is basically at the small and the mid-sized businesses. Definitely, because the bigger size businesses, they can manage all such challenges, but the smaller businesses as well as the mid-sized businesses are basically facing a lot of challenges from the big size enterprises. So for that purpose, this free and open source software would be very immensely useful. So it is a multi-dimensional features which aims to help the businesses satisfy their various types of needs, specifically in the supply chain management, in the customer relationship management, specifically in the resource planning. So you have different other aspects, right, related to these models, and so that these type of free and open source software would be immensely useful for that purpose. Now the India is basically well positioned to become a vibrant hub for free and open software, right, which is basically innovations in that field, right? Because if you see the number of users or the subscribers which basically use the data, so number of subscriber which uses 4G data is 96% basically whom access to the digital world, because large number of subscribers are basically using this 4G data. So that means they have access to this open source based mobile operating system, which are probably or which are primarily based on the Android system. Now we are also using this open, the free and open source software, right, that you are using basically through the Play Store, right? They are all free and open source softwares which are developed by such innovators, by the startups, which are useful immensely not only for the general public but also for the small and the big businesses, the mid-sized businesses also. And India's largest governmental projects, right, including the Aadhaar, as well as many technology startups also using this free and open source software platforms, right? So acknowledging the huge potential with that free and open source softwares, the government of India had already adopted a policy on the open source software in 2015 for promotion of such software innovations in our country. All right, so that is basically a poster for that purpose. Okay, next, the Armenian genocide. So first of all, let me give you a brief introduction about the news. So what happens is Armenian genocide was happened between 1915 to 1922. It was the time when the Armenian genocide was basically occurred between, wait a minute, yeah, so Armenian genocide was occurred in between 1915 to 1922, right? It was the period when the First World War also occurred. It was the period when the First World War was also occurred. So at that point of the time, the millions of the Armenians basically have perished. So that is known as the Armenian genocide. Now what happens is, after a century, almost a century later, the US President Joe Biden is preparing to acknowledge that there was an Armenian genocide where the systematic killing and the deportation of the Armenians, or hundreds of the thousands of the Armenians, was done specifically by Ottoman Empire, which was basically ruling at that point of the time. So which was occurred almost a century ago. So the millions of the Armenians which was deported, which was systematically killed in that process, that is called Armenian genocide by the Ottoman Empire. The President Joe Biden is going to acknowledge that fact that the Armenian genocide had killed millions of the hundreds of the thousands of the Armenians, millions of such Armenians by the Ottoman Empire. But the Turkey, which is a country where the Ottoman Empire was probably based at that point of the time, it disagreed with that, right? So though there is consensus among the historians that the Armenian genocide was occurred between 1915 to 1922, it was during the First World War, right? And after that, probably thousands of, hundreds of the thousands of the Armenians were basically perished, right? They were perished due to killing, due to starvation, due to disease, and some were basically definitely deported. It was, you can also, basically, compare it with the Holocaust that was happens in the, specifically in the Germany, when the Jews were basically, persecuted by basically the Nazis, right? So where also the millions of the Jews basically have been killed. So here also then Armenian genocides, millions of the Armenians, the Armenia is a country where the people who belongs to the Armenia, they are called Armenian. So Armenian genocide was basically occurred. Now, having understood that one, let me give you a brief understanding about Armenian genocide as well as the Ottoman Empire. So listen carefully. So Armenian genocide basically is known as systematic mass murder, or you can say it is ethnic cleansing of around 1 million ethnic Armenians, right, from which are basically belongs to the Asia Minor, right, as well as the area which is adjoining to the Ottoman Empire, right. So there basically the genocide was basically occurred. So what happens is, during the invasion of Russia and the Persian territory, what happens is this Ottoman Empire or Ottoman leaders basically massacres the local Armenians, right. So this massacres turned into the genocide, right, definitely, which has led to the killing of the millions of the people, specifically from the Armenian descent or from the ethnic descent. So that was the time when the Ottoman authorities basically rounded up, arrested and deported hundreds of the Armenians, intellectuals and the community leaders from the Istanbul, and many such people were basically systematically killed or deported. So what is that Ottoman Empire which has executed that millions of the Armenian people? So Ottoman Empire was basically created by the Turkish tribes in Anatolia, right, which is basically grows at that point of the time the most powerful states in the world during 15th and the 16th century, that was created by the Turkish tribes. Now this Ottoman period, which was spanned for more than 600 years, right, since its inception, right, it came to end only in 1922, right, when the Ottoman Empire was completely defeated after the First World War, and it was replaced by the Turkish Republic that currently we know, the Turkey, right. So it has replaced, so Ottoman Empire was replaced by the Turkish Republic. So it has almost a history from the 15th and 16th century up to 1922, almost 600 years it has ruled, right. So you can say that it was replaced by the Turkish Republic, and the various successor states that was originated after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, that in the southern Eastern Europe, specifically in the middle, in the Middle East also, for example, the most of the southeastern Europe, like, the Bina, Hungary, Balkan, Greece, Ukraine, the portion of Iraq, Syria, Israel, Egypt, right, Algeria, right, all such were basically, having some sort of a linkages with that Ottoman Empire. Okay. Now, as I told you that the nomadic Turkish chief, which was founded this dynasty in this empire around 1300, right. So this was the part when the Ottoman history was characterized by almost territorial expansion. Since then, this formation and the domination was basically spread from, from this region to diverse region to the greater politico-administrative stretch. And that point of the time, the Turkish Empire was basically, in the inception stage, or the Ottoman Empire was basically in the inception stage, and in the initial stage, the leaders of the Turkish warriors that were basically having the faith of Islam. That means the Ottoman Empire having the faith of Islam. Their leaders were basically followers of Islam, right? And they were known by the honorific title called Ghazi, right? So they were basically fought against the shrinking Christian Byzantine state. That point of the time when their expansion was there was a fight between the Ottoman Empire as well as the Byzantine Empire that was basically dominated by the Christians. So there was a fight between these two. The Ottoman Empire follows the Islamists, and the Byzantine Empire or Byzantine state basically followed the Christianity, right? And that was basically slowly engulfing the huge region, specifically in the Europe as well as in the Middle East portion. So that was a brief history about the Ottoman Empire. You can read more about in the NCERT books as well as in the from the websites also. Okay. So in the basically Armenian genocide, is difficult to estimate how many people were killed, but definitely in one estimate, approximately 1.5 million people died. 1.5 million, 1 million is equal to around 10 lakh. So 15 lakh people died, perished during such such genocide. And some researchers basically compared this Armenian genocide with basically the Holocaust, where in the Germany millions of the Jews were also perished, right? So it is basically a wider acknowledgement of of this Armenian genocide by the international community, right? Definitely maybe unwelcome for the Turkey, because Turkey definitely have the linkages with that Ottoman Empire. So that is the historical blood that will be put on the Turkey if the Turkey accepted that type of genocide. But that was happened, and millions of the people belongs to the Armenian ethnicity was killed, systematically killed at that point of the time. And every year April 24 is basically celebrated as Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day, where the millions of the Armenians was basically killed by the Ottoman Empire. So here you have the political map of Armenia, right? The neighboring country is basically Turkey, which was also ruled by the Ottoman Empire at that point of the time. Okay. Next, the Vanita Gupta. See, Vanita Gupta is basically a lawyer, a civil rights lawyer in the United States of America. Now, she has been confirmed, right, or she has been voted to confirm, right, as an associate attorney general, right? That means she would be making, or she would becoming the first Indian American to serve as a US Justice Department's third highest ranking official, that is associate attorney general. So civil rights lawyer Miss Vanita Gupta would be appointed as an associate attorney general after the United States Senate voted her, right, to her basically appointment as an associate attorney general, and she would be the third highest ranking official with the United States Justice Department in the United States of America. Miss Vanita Gupta was basically born in 1974, right, and she is basically the American civil rights attorney. Regarding her the leadership, she was the president and the chief executive officer of the Leadership Conference on the Civil and the Human Rights. Basically she has more vocal about the civil rights, right? So she was basically a civil rights lawyer, and from 2014 to 2017 she served as a principal deputy assistant attorney general, as well as she also head of the civil rights division of the US Department of Justice, right, where she was basically the chief civil rights prosecutor for the United States. And she was also once held the position that she was basically a civil rights lawyer and deputy legal director of American Civil Liberties Union. So she had various diverse positions with basically US Department of Justice, and she also oversaw the National Criminal Justice Reform effort, which was introduced by the Department of Justice. And on January 7, 2021, the President Joe Biden nominated Miss Gupta or Vanita Gupta to serve as an Associate Attorney General, and that was recently confirmed by United States Senate. So United States Senate has voted to confirm Miss Vanita Gupta to appoint as Associate Attorney General, which is a third highest ranking official with the US Department of Justice, and she was confirmed on April 21st. right? This year itself as a Associate Attorney General. All right, so she is Miss Vinita Gupta. Okay, next, the Special Task Force to monitor the J&K government employees. So what is happening is that I'll give you a brief background. Certain employees belongs to the Jammu and Kashmir government. They are basically supporting some of the extremist activities, right? That means they are involved in some sort of a the security activities, or some sort of a security threat activities or anti-national activities. So that means they are posing threat to the security front. So to control or to monitor those employees, a special task force is appointed. Now, this special task force is constituted by the Jammu and Kashmir government, right, for identifying and scrutinizing all such employees which are currently been working with the Jammu and Kashmir government. That means they are employees with the J&K government and they are involved in some sort of anti-national activities. So to monitor, to track down, to identify them, a special task force have been constituted by the Jammu and Kashmir government, right? So what is the composition of this special task force? So this special task force, first of all, will be chaired by the Additional Director General of Police, that is ADGP, that basically basically belongs to CID in Jammu and Kashmir, would act as a chairman of the special task force, as well as it will also have the IGP, that is Inspector General of Police, right, as the representative of the Home Department. Then it will also have the representatives of the Department of Law, Justice Member, Parliamentary Affairs also, and the concerned department, which is basically belongs to the particular employee. That will also be, the representatives in this special task force to monitor, to scrutinizing, to identify that employee who are basically involved in such type of anti-national activities. All right. Now, this special task force would scrutinize the cases of the employees that are suspected of being involved in certain activities that require the action to be taken under section 311 to clause C of the Constitution of India, which provides certain scrutiny over those employees who are basically involved in certain activities. Now, the special task force which have been constituted have been tasked to compile the records of such employees. So it will basically make a database, it will compile a record, and that will engage with other members of the terror monitoring group, right, to identify such employees. So first of all, let me give you what is this terror monitoring group and why this special task force would engage or would basically engage with the members with having the linkages with terror monitoring group, right? And those, with the help of those members, the such compilation of the records will be done by the special task force with respect to those employees belong to Jammu and Kashmir government. So this terror monitoring cell, first of all, let me give you, it was set up by the Union Home Ministry. Okay, it is basically a multidisciplinary terror monitoring group. Okay, why this terror monitoring group was formed by the Union Home Ministry? To ensure the synergized and concerted action against the terror financing as well as the terror related activities in the Jammu and Kashmir. Okay, now the members, it is a multidisciplinary body. That means it is basically having the members from the diverse field. That means the terror monitoring group, which basically concerned with the terror financing as well as the terror related activities in the Jammu and Kashmir, would basically comprises of the Director General of Police, right, which is basically again CID in the Jammu and Kashmir, which basically, right, who would act as a chairman. Then it will also consisting of the Inspector General of Police, that means IGP, right, as well as it will also be having the membership of the Additional Director of Intelligence Bureau in the Jammu and Kashmir, as well as it will also have the representatives from the CBI, Central Bureau of Investigation, NIA, National Investigation Agencies, ED, Enforcement Directorate, as well as the CBDT, that is Central Board of Direct Taxes, as well as the CBIC. So it will have the diverse membership in that terror monitoring cell or terror monitoring group. So that help the STF or Special Task Force would be compiling the records of such employees, right? So this move comes after many of the government employees in the past, they have shown their solidarity they have found expressing their political opinion in the public space openly, right, on the Kashmir conflict. They have shown their links with terror financing, terror support, and all sort of things in the Kashmir Valley, specifically in the Jammu and Kashmir, right? For that purpose, because many of our security forces are finding very difficult that these people or these employees are supporting those extremists who are basically spreading the violence in the Jammu and Kashmir. For that purpose, a special task force was basically set up, right? All right. Next, you have the Shankha Ghosh. The Shankha Ghosh, basically an eminent Bengali poet, right, who was recently been died because of the coronavirus. He was basically 89 years old, right? So the Shankha Ghosh was died because of the coronavirus. He was considered as an authority on the Rabindranath Tagore, and he has written many books like the Adim Lata, right, Gulmome, the Murkha Baro Samjek Ne, right, which was written basically in the Bengali. So their names itself is a Bengali term. Okay, now the poet, which was the Shankha Ghosh, was also vocal about the contemporary issues. So the Shankha Ghosh basically also shows some sort of opinions regarding those contemporary issues, and he was basically also forefront in basically many political upheavals in the state, like the Nandigram violence that was occurred during the left front government that was there. So what is that? What was the Nandigram violence? In the Nandigram violence, what was happens? A violence what occurred in the Nandigram, which is basically in the East Midnapur district of West Bengal in 2007. Okay, which was happened aftermath of a failed project by the communist government of West Bengal that was ruling party. Okay, the communist government basically tried to acquire the land for a special economic zone, specifically in the Nandigram in the East Midnapur district of West Bengal, right? So that policy led to the emergency in that region, and many people died. Almost 14 people died in the police shooting at that point of the time. Shankha Ghosh was basically awarded the Padma Bhushan in 2011. Okay, he was also awarded Jananpith Award in 2016, and he was also awarded the Sahitya Akademi Award in 1977 for its book The Barare Pratha Tha, right, which is basically the most renowned book belongs to Mr. Shankha Ghosh. So he is Shankha Ghosh, who was died of coronavirus complications. All right. Next, the gender bias and inclusion in the advertising in India. So first of all, as you notice, the advertising in that was shown in the media, right, in the TVs or in a lot of things, right, there is some gender wise was also shown in that. What is gender wise? The woman was basically portrayed, right, as as a figure that is basically used either for the domestic works, or they were looks like as they were subservient to the males, right? The female was shown as a basically the weaker sex during such advertisements. Their beauty is more shown, right? Their sexuality is shown in those advertisements. So all such gender biases are basically shown in India in terms of advertisement. So a study was basically released by the UNICEF and the Geena Davis Institute on Gender in Media, that is the GDI, right, which is basically titled as the Gender Bias and Inclusion in Advertisement in India. So it has given certain facts regarding the gender bias which have been shown in the advertisement in India. So let me give you a brief outline about the UNICEF. Everybody knows about the UNICEF. What is UNICEF? The full form, UNICEF means United Nations Children Fund. It is very simple, right? It is a United Nations agency which is responsible for providing the humanitarian and the developmental aid to the children worldwide. So that is what it is, United Nations Children Fund, right? This agency is worldwide because it is almost present in almost 192 countries and the territories. What is this second? That is Geena Davis Institute on Gender in the Media. So that is, first of all, is a non-profit research organization. Okay, this non-profit research organization is founded in 2004. It was founded by the Geena Davis, right? On her name, right? That the name of this non-profit research organization also named. It has been headquartered in the Los Angeles, California, in the USA, right? the main purpose of this non-profit research organization is specifically to promote the gender representation in the media, right, as well as advocate for the equal representation of the women, specifically in the media, in the films, and all sort of things. Okay, so the research basically measures about 1000 televisions and the YouTube advertisements that was shown in India in 2019. So based on that, a research paper or the study was basically published. So it has basically analyzed the basically most of those advertisements. So what has given in that report is that it has analyzed that whatever the advertisement that are shown in India, that was superior to the global benchmark. So that means it has appreciated the advertisement that was shown in India that is superior to the global benchmarks, as far as the girls and women have parity of the representation in terms of the screen and the speaking time. That means the women's screening time, that means women's were shows. For example, if 100% screening time is there, more than 50% of the time is shown with respect to the women. That means their screening time is more, their speaking time is more. That means women have spoken more during such advertisement. They have given more weightage in terms of their screening, in terms of their filming, in terms of their speaking time. In that perspective, right, the Indian advertisements are superior to the global benchmark. That means that is okay. But they have shown certain gender stereotypes, right, which was shown in terms of certain gender bias. What are those? First of all, the women's are basically shown, the males are basically shown as a merit, right, which are less likely to be shown in the paid occupation, right. The women, they are most likely to be shown in the paid occupation, right, and the women are most likely to be depicted as a caretakers, as a parents, rather than a decision maker, right. Then study will further says that most of the women characteristics dominate the screen time. So that was I was explaining. Out of 100% screen time, 59.7% of the screen time dominated by the woman. That is okay. The speaking time is also dominated by the woman. That means out of 100%, the women speakers almost took 56.3% of the time. That means majority, that means 56% of the speaking time devoted to the woman. That is also okay, right? But these speaking time, the screening time that was devoted to the woman, it is mostly for those products which are related to the food and the beauty products, that too to the women consumers. So that means they are morely focusing on the women consumers, women by the women for the women consumers, for food and the beauty products. So they are the major drivers for such type of advertisement. This is the first report. Then the second, it says that the male are basically shown in terms of the decision makings, right, about the futures, than the male characteristics, than the female characteristics. For example, 7.3% is basically shown in terms of the male characteristics, which are basically shown in terms of decision making, as compared to 4.8% the female, right. Then if you see the the household decision, who can take the more household decisions, the females are basically shown in the 2% cases, compared to the males, which are shown in the 4.9% cases. Okay. Then the following activities that are shown, the female characteristics. For example, the female are shown, right, when you say doing the following activities than the male. So for example, the shopping, they are shown 4.5% as compared to 2.3%. For cleaning purpose, the female is showing 4.8%, then male, which is showing in 2.2%. Then for the purpose and preparation of the meals specifically, the female shows in 5.4% and 3.4% in case of male. So you see the cleaning, meals preparation, right, all such things, right, the women are predominantly shown. Okay. And if you see specifically for intelligent part also, the women are considered as a somewhat inferior intelligent, right, being, specifically in the advertisement. So the male characters are more likely to be shown as a more intelligent being, right, than the female. So in the 32.2% cases, the male is more intelligently shown in the advertisement than the female, which is basically shown in 26.2% of advertisements. Okay. Then the female characteristics are basically 9 times more likely to be shown as a stunning or very attractive. That is, their sexuality is more represented in the advertisement than the male. So in the male case, only 6% of their attractiveness is basically shown, but the female 5.9% cases, right? So if you see further, the female characteristics basically they have shown in terms of thin. So you have seen that their body looks thin in case of female. Okay, the male characteristics they have shown in terms of the bulge body, right? So that is the variety of the body size have been shown in the Indian advertisements, specifically with respect to the male. So the male superiority, male attractiveness, male stunningness is not given enough weightage in terms of the varieties of the body size have been shown. But for the females, specifically their thin and the lean body have been shown. Okay, so that is one case you can see here, the women advertisers. Okay, next, the Earth Day, right? So here the Earth Day is celebrated every year on the April 22nd, right? That you already probably know. It is basically an international event that is celebrated worldwide, right? On the Earth Day, we pledge a support to the environmental protection. Okay, and this year's theme for the Earth Day is basically restoring our Earth. So this year's theme for the Earth Day is basically to restore our Earth from the further degradation. So this year theme is focusing on the natural process, emerging the green technologies, innovating thinking that can basically restore the Earth ecosystems in the world. Okay, and in 2021, this marks the 51st anniversary of the annual celebrations regarding the Earth Day. And this year is also the most prominent because the major climatic related events are basically taken place in the basically specifically on the April 22nd, which is also celebrated as a Earth Day throughout the world. What are these major climatic related events? First of all, the Leaders Summit on the Climate hosted by the United States. This is the first. Second, the Exponential Climate Action Summit on the financing the race to the zero emissions. Okay, these are the two most prominent the climate related events that are basically taken place on the April 22nd. Now, I will give you a brief outline about the Leaders Summit on the Climate hosted, which is basically hosted by the United States. So what happens is, the President Joe Biden, which is the new president of the United States of America, has invited 40 world leaders on the climate, right? On specifically the Leaders Summit on the climate. So that Leaders Summit that will be hosted by the United States of America on April 22nd and April 23 has invited 40 global leaders specifically for the Leaders Summit on the climate change. Okay, so this will be definitely a virtual summit that will be streamed for the public viewing live, right? And the leaders specifically in the Leaders Summit on the climate will underscore the urgency, specifically the economic benefits of the stronger the climatic action, as well as the Leaders Summit would basically a key milestone on the road to the United Nations Climate Change Conference that will be held this November in the Glasgow, that will be also known as COP26, that will be held in the Glasgow. Okay, now second is basically the Exponential Climate Action Summit on the financing the race to the zero emissions. What is that? It is basically an initiative that brings together innovators, scientists, companies, as well as the NGOs, right, with a mission to have the emissions at least half, or cut down the emissions at least half before 2030 through exponential climatic actions as well as the solutions. And this Exponential Roadmap initiative is an official partner of the United Nations Race to Zero campaign, which is basically aiming at the zero emissions, right, from such type of activities. All right, so this is the theme of this year's Earth Day. Okay, next, the Civil Services Day. As you know that Prime Minister Narendra Modi have wished all civil servants on the occasion of the Civil Services Day. As you know that the Civil Services Day is celebrated every year on 21st of April. So on the occasion of the Civil Services Day, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has wished all the civil servants who have contributed their outstanding performance and the outstanding contribution to the development of this nation. So on this day, the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel addressed the first batch of probationers at All India Administrative Services training schools at the Metcalfe House, New Delhi in 1947, and that is the day on which we have also celebrated our Civil Services Day. So in that speech, the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel called the civil servants as the steel frame of India. So what is that Metcalfe House? See, Metcalfe House is basically name given to the two residential houses that was built in 19th century in Delhi. The two houses that was built. The one house that was built in old Delhi civil lines, and other house which was basically built in the Mehrauli, South Delhi, right? So it was basically, you can say that he was, the house which is associated with such type of governing bodies. Okay. The objective of the Civil Services Day is basically to make the civil servants rededicate themselves to the cause of the citizens, right? To serve the citizens with their full heart, with their full devotion, with their full dedication, and to renew their commitment to the civil services and to renew their commitment to the public services. For that purpose, the Civil Services Day was basically celebrated every year on the 21st of April, right? To celebrate that one. Okay, so here you can see the poster or the theme of the National Civil Services Day that is celebrated every year on the 21st of April 2021. All right, let's move to the new news. That is the Codex Committee on the Spices and Culinary Herbs, that is also known as the CCSCH. So what is that? So first of all, the Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs was basically established under, the Codex Alimentarius Commission. That was basically a commission, the fifth session of the Codex Committee on the Spices and the Culinary Herbs, which began virtually, right, and on the virtual mode. And with that, the India is basically acting as a host of the fifth session of the Codex Committee on the Spices and Culinary Herbs, right? And the Spice Board of India is basically serving as a secretariat for such session which belongs to the Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs. So what is that Codex Committee on the Spices and the Culinary Herbs? See, the Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs was basically formed in 2013, right? It was formed to develop and expand worldwide the standard for the spices as well as the herbs. So to make a standard for the spices and the culinary herbs, the Codex Committee on the Spices and the Culinary Herbs was basically set up. It was set up with the support of more than 100 countries, right, including India. The India would serve as a host country for that. And for that purpose, the Spice Board of India, which is a statutory body, would act as a secretariat for organizing the sessions under the Codex Committee on the Spices and the Culinary Herbs. All right. And here, since its inception, since 2013 onward, the Codex Committee on Spices and the Culinary Herbs, that is also known as CCSCH, have been successful in developing the harmonized global codex standards for the spices and the herbs, right, throughout the world. And in the past four sessions, because this would be the fifth session that will be organized, right, by the Spice Board of India. So in the past four sessions that was organized, the committee has already developed and finalized the standard for the 4 spices. That was the main objective of the formation of the Codex Committee on the Spices and the Culinary Herbs. So it has developed basically the standard for the 4 spices. What are that? The dried and the dehydrated form of the black pepper, the white pepper, and the green pepper. So for that, all 3 they have developed, and finalized the standard, as well as they have developed and finalized the standard for the cumin, thymine, and as well as the garlic, for the purpose of the standardizing as well as to finalize the standards related to those spices. All right, what is that Codex Alimentarius Commission? So that is basically a commission that was set up in 1963. It was set up in 1963, right? It is basically an intergovernmental body that is basically developed or established by basically the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, that is basically a United Nations agency, as well as the World Health Organization, right? It is basically set up within the framework of Joint Food Standard Program. The main motto is to protect the health of the consumers as well as to ensure the fair practices in the food trade worldwide. So the Codex Alimentarius Commission basically help in that type of the project, which basically protect the health of the consumers as well as the fair practices specifically in the food trade worldwide. It was set up in 1963. All right. So thank you very much. That's all for today. We will meet again tomorrow for our next current affairs. Thank you very much.